When my boss's wife cornered me in the break room and I rejected her advances, I thought the nightmare was over. Until the next morning when my boss stormed into the office screaming that I just made the worst mistake of my life. What I didn't know was that she'd already spun an elaborate lie that would destroy my career, my reputation, and nearly my entire life. My name is David, and I learned the hard way that some people use kindness as a weapon. Working as a marketing coordinator at Henderson Associates should have been my dream job. Great pay, respected company, and a boss who seemed to value my work. Robert Henderson ran the firm with an iron fist, but he was fair to employees who delivered results. His wife, Margaret, was a different story entirely. She started visiting the office more frequently about 3 months ago, always dressed like she was heading to some fancy charity event. Margaret would glide through our cubicles, making small talk and complimenting everyone's work. At first, I thought she was just being friendly. She'd stop by my desk and ask about my projects, nodding thoughtfully as I explained our latest campaigns. "You're so much more creative than the others," she'd say with that perfect smile. "Robert's lucky to have someone with your talent." The compliments felt genuine back then. I was proud of my work and grateful for the recognition. Margaret seemed genuinely interested in the marketing strategies I developed, especially the social media campaigns that had boosted our client retention by 30%. She'd lean over my shoulder to look at my computer screen, her expensive perfume making me slightly dizzy. Last Tuesday started like any other day. I was working late, trying to finish the quarterly presentation that Robert needed for the board meeting. The office was nearly empty, just me and the security guard downstairs. I was deep in concentration when I heard heels clicking across the marble floor. "David, you're here, so late again." Margaret's voice made me look up from my laptop. She was wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "You work harder than anyone else in this place." Something in her tone was different that night. More intimate, more personal. She moved closer to my desk, her eyes scanning the empty office to make sure we were alone. "I've been thinking about what you said last week, about wanting more responsibility," she continued, perching on the edge of my desk. "Robert doesn't always see potential the way I do." My heart started beating faster, but not in a good way. The way she was looking at me, the way she positioned herself, it felt wrong. Professional boundaries were crumbling right in front of me, and I didn't know how to rebuild them without causing problems. "Mrs. Henderson, I appreciate the feedback, but I should probably head home soon," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She laughed softly, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Call me Margaret, and why don't we grab some coffee first? I have some ideas about your future here that might interest you." Before I could respond, she was already walking toward the break room, looking back over her shoulder with an expression I couldn't quite read. Against every instinct screaming in my head, I followed her. The break room felt smaller with Margaret in it, like the walls had moved closer together. She busied herself making coffee, moving with the confidence of someone who owned everything around her. I stood near the door, every muscle in my body tense with anticipation of something I couldn't name. "You know, David, I've been watching you," she said without turning around. "The way you handle difficult clients, the creative solutions you come up with, you're wasted in that little cubicle." She handed me a steaming mug, her fingers brushing mine longer than necessary. The coffee was too hot, burning my tongue as I took a nervous sip. "Robert can be blind to talent sometimes," Margaret continued, moving closer until I could feel the heat radiating from her body. "But I see everything. I see how the other employees look up to you, how clients specifically request to work with you again." My back hit the counter as she stepped forward, trapping me between her body and the cold granite. Her hand reached up to straighten my tie, a gesture that would have seemed innocent to anyone watching but felt like a violation. "Mrs. Henderson, I think there might be some confusion here," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. Her laugh was sharp, cutting through the air like broken glass. "Oh, David, you're so naive. There's no confusion at all." Her hand moved from my tie to my chest, fingers splayed across my shirt. I could smell her perfume, see the calculation behind her perfectly applied makeup. This wasn't attraction or desire. It was power, pure and simple. "Stop," I said firmly, grabbing her wrist and gently pushing her hand away. This isn't appropriate. Margaret's expression shifted faster than I thought possible. The seductive smile vanished, replaced by something cold and dangerous. Her eyes narrowed as she stepped back, but not in retreat, in preparation. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice dripping with venom. "How dare you reject me?" I stared at her in shock, unable to process the transformation happening in front of me. This wasn't the charming, sophisticated woman who attended charity galas and hosted dinner parties. This was someone else entirely, someone who wasn't used to hearing the word no. "You have no idea what you've just done," Margaret continued, her voice growing stronger, more confident. "No idea at all." She smoothed her dress, fixed her hair, and walked toward the door. But before leaving, she turned back with a smile that made my blood freeze. "See you tomorrow, David. It's going to be a very interesting day." I stood alone in the break room for several minutes after she left, my hands shaking as I tried to understand what had just happened. The coffee mug slipped from my fingers, shattering on the floor in a spray of ceramic and brown liquid. As I cleaned up the mess, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just walked into a trap that had been months in the making. At exactly 8:30 a.m. the next morning, Robert Henderson's voice exploded across the office like a bomb going off. Every conversation stopped, every keyboard fell silent, and 40 pairs of eyes turned toward my cubicle where my boss stood red-faced and trembling with rage. "You sick piece of garbage," he screamed, loud enough for people 3 floors down to hear. "How could you do this to my wife?" My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. Behind Robert, I could see Margaret dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, her shoulders shaking with what looked like genuine sobs. She'd clearly been crying for a while. Her makeup was smeared, her perfectly styled hair disheveled. "Mr. Henderson, I don't understand what you're talking about," I said, standing up slowly with my hands visible, like I was dealing with a dangerous animal. "Don't you dare play innocent with me." Robert's finger jabbed toward my face. "My wife told me everything. How you cornered her last night. How you made those disgusting comments. How you tried to force yourself on her." The words hit me like physical blows. Around the office, I could see my co-workers' faces shifting from confusion to disgust. Sarah from accounting covered her mouth in horror. Tom from IT shook his head and looked away. These are people I'd worked with for 2 years, people who knew me. "That's not what happened," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mrs. Henderson approached me. She was the one who. She was trying to be nice to you." Robert's voice cracked with emotion. "She felt sorry for you. Working late all the time with no friends, no life outside this office. And this is how you repay her kindness." Margaret let out a sob that sounded perfectly genuine. "I just wanted to encourage him," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I thought he was lonely. I never imagined he would misinterpret my friendship as something else." The performance was flawless. She turned herself into the victim and me into the predator with a skill that left me speechless. Every detail of her story was crafted to make her look innocent and me look guilty. "Security cameras," I said desperately. "Check the security cameras from last night. They'll show what really happened." Robert's laugh was bitter and cold. "You think I'm stupid? I already checked them. The footage shows you following my wife into the break room. It shows you standing close to her, talking for 20 minutes. What it doesn't show is audio, which means it's your word against hers." My heart sank as I realized how carefully Margaret had planned this. She'd chosen the one location in the office where conversations couldn't be recorded, where visual evidence could be twisted to support whatever story she wanted to tell. "And I know whose word I trust," Robert continued. "Pack your things. You're fired. Security will escort you out in 10 minutes. As I began emptying my desk drawers with shaking hands, I caught Margaret watching me from across the office. When our eyes met, she gave me the smallest smile, just a tiny curve of her lips that lasted barely a second. But I saw it, and I knew that everything she'd just done was calculated, planned, and executed with the precision of someone who'd done this before. 3 weeks of unemployment felt like 3 years in prison. Every morning, I'd wake up hoping it was all a nightmare, only to remember that my career was destroyed and my reputation was in ruins. The severance check Robert had grudgingly given me was running out fast, and job interviews weren't going well. Your references from Henderson & Associates were quite interesting, the hiring manager at Press and Marketing said, during what I thought was a promising interview. Her tone had shifted completely after a 10-minute phone call to my former employer. We've decided to go with another candidate. This was the 5th rejection in 2 weeks, and each one followed the same pattern. Enthusiastic interest, glowing discussions about my portfolio, then a sudden change after they called Robert for references. I could only imagine what he was telling them about me. But the professional damage was nothing compared to the social isolation. Walking through my neighborhood had become a gauntlet of whispered conversations and pointed stares. Margaret hadn't just destroyed my career. She'd somehow managed to poison the entire community against me. At the grocery store, I ran into Janet Morrison, a neighbor whose kids I'd helped with their science fair projects. When she saw me approaching, she grabbed her cart and steered it down a different aisle. The message was clear. I was now someone to be avoided, someone dangerous. How could you do that to such a sweet woman? Sarah from my old job cornered me at the pharmacy, her voice full of disgust. Margaret Henderson is one of the kindest people I've ever met. She volunteers at 3 different charities. Sweet woman. Kind person. The words echoed in my head as I sat in my apartment that night, staring at a stack of overdue bills. Margaret had built such a perfect public image that questioning her story felt like attacking motherhood itself. That's when my old college roommate Jake called. He'd heard about what happened through mutual friends and wanted to help. Jake worked as a private investigator now, specializing in corporate fraud cases. Something about this whole thing stinks, Jake said over coffee at a diner across town. The way you're describing her behavior, it sounds practiced, like she knew exactly what buttons to push. What do you mean? I asked, desperate for any hope that someone believed me. Think about it. She approached you when the office was empty. She chose a location with cameras, but no audio. She had her story ready before you even got to work the next morning. That's not the behavior of someone who is genuinely surprised or hurt. Jake pulled out his laptop and started typing. If she's done this before, there'll be a pattern. Let me check something. What he found made my stomach drop. Over the past 5 years, Henderson & Associates had lost 7 male employees for various forms of inappropriate conduct. All were in their 20s or 30s. All were considered rising stars, and all had been terminated within weeks of receiving promotions or recognition. Look at this, Jake said, pointing to his screen. Michael Torres, fired 3 years ago for allegedly making inappropriate comments to Margaret at the company Christmas party. He'd just been promoted to senior analyst 2 weeks before. The pattern was becoming clear, but I needed more than speculation. How do we prove it? We need to talk to these guys, Jake said, and we need to get our hands on those security recordings you mentioned. If Margaret's been doing this for years, she's gotten comfortable. Comfortable people make mistakes. That night, Jake made contact with Michael Torres. The conversation was brief but revealing. Michael's story was almost identical to mine. Margaret had approached him at a company event, made inappropriate advances, then claimed he'd harassed her when he rejected her. I tried to fight it, Michael told us over a video call. But who's going to believe me over the boss's wife? I lost everything, my job, my reputation. My girlfriend left me because she thought I was some kind of predator. Why didn't you come forward before? I asked. Michael's laugh was bitter. Come forward to who? Robert Henderson owns half the city council. Margaret sits on the boards of every major charity in town. They're untouchable. But as I listened to Michael's story, I realized something important. Margaret wasn't untouchable. She just thought she was. And people who think they're untouchable often get careless about covering their tracks. Jake, I said slowly, you mentioned those security recordings. What if there's more on them than Robert realizes? Breaking into Henderson & Associates' digital security system turned out to be easier than I expected, thanks to a password I'd helped Robert create 6 months earlier. Jake and I sat in his cramped office at 2 a.m., surrounded by empty coffee cups and computer screens glowing in the darkness. I can't believe you still have admin access, Jake whispered, even though we were alone. Most companies would have revoked this immediately. Robert's not exactly tech-savvy. I replied, typing in the credentials I'd memorized. He probably forgot I even had these permissions. The security footage loaded slowly, frame by frame, revealing the truth that Margaret had tried so hard to hide. There I was, working late at my desk, completely focused on my computer screen. Then Margaret appeared, walking purposefully toward my cubicle with the confidence of someone executing a well-rehearsed plan. "Look at her body language." Jake pointed at the screen. "She's not nervous or hesitant. She knows exactly what she's doing." The timestamp showed 9:47 p.m. when Margaret first approached my desk. What Robert had described as me following his wife was actually her leading me to the break room after several minutes of conversation. The visual evidence completely contradicted her story, but I knew this wouldn't be enough on its own. "We need audio," I said, frustrated. Robert was right about the break room cameras not picking up sound. Jake's fingers flew across his keyboard. "Maybe not from that camera, but Henderson and Associates upgraded their phone system last year, remember? The new VoIP system records everything for quality assurance." My heart started beating faster. The break room had an extension phone mounted on the wall, part of the company's internal communication network. If the system was recording all calls, it might have picked up our conversation as background audio. 20 minutes of searching through digital files revealed something incredible. The phone system had indeed recorded ambient sound from the break room, treating our conversation as potential call traffic. Every word Margaret had said was captured in crystal clear audio. Robert doesn't appreciate talent like I do. Margaret's voice played through Jake's speakers, followed by my obvious discomfort and her increasingly aggressive advances. When she said, "You have no idea what you've just done," her tone was cold and calculating, nothing like the tearful victim she'd portrayed the next morning. "We've got her," Jake breathed, but I was already thinking bigger. "Let's see what else she's been up to," I said, accessing older security files. If she's done this before, there might be evidence. What we found over the next 3 hours was a pattern of predatory behavior spanning 5 years. Margaret approaching young male employees after hours, cornering them in isolated areas, then playing the victim when her advances were rejected. The security footage showed her meeting with HR representatives, her theatrical tears, and perfectly timed emotional breakdowns that had destroyed career after career. She's not just a predator, I realized, watching her manipulate yet another situation. She's a professional destroyer of lives. But the most shocking discovery came when Jake accessed Margaret's email account through the company's shared server. Hidden in a folder labeled Personal Projects were detailed profiles of her victims, psychological assessments, vulnerability analyses, and step-by-step plans for their destruction. "Listen to this," Jake said, reading from one of her emails to a friend. "David seems like the perfect target. He's ambitious but insecure, works too hard to have many friends, and desperately wants approval from authority figures. Robert will believe anything I tell him because he's still guilty about our marriage problems last year." The calculated cruelty took my breath away. Margaret hadn't just destroyed my life on a whim. She'd studied me like a scientist examining a lab rat, identifying my weaknesses and exploiting them with surgical precision. "There's more," Jake continued, scrolling through months of correspondence. "She's been planning this for almost a year. Look at this email from 8 months ago. Found my next project at work. Marketing coordinator, early 30s, recently got recognition for a big campaign. Robert's been praising him a lot lately, which makes him perfect for taking down a notch." My hand was shaking as I copied the files to multiple secure drives. Margaret hadn't just committed harassment and false accusations. She'd orchestrated a conspiracy to destroy innocent people's lives for her own entertainment and psychological satisfaction. "We need to be careful how we use this," Jake warned. "If we just dump everything online, she'll claim the files were fabricated or hacked illegally." He was right. Margaret had spent years building her reputation as a charitable, trustworthy member of the community. Simply presenting evidence wouldn't be enough. We needed to let her destroy herself publicly, in a way that couldn't be denied or explained away. "The company's annual shareholders meeting is next week," I said slowly, an idea forming. "All the board members will be there, plus major clients and community leaders. What if we could get this evidence in front of everyone at once? Jake's eyes lit up with understanding. She won't be able to control the narrative if it comes out in front of that many witnesses. Exactly. And I know someone on the board who's been asking questions about the company's high turnover rate among male employees. Patricia Williams, the chief financial officer, had mentioned her concerns during my exit interview. She'd seemed genuinely puzzled by the pattern of harassment claims and wondered if there might be underlying issues in the company culture. Patricia's laptop will be connected to the main presentation system. I continued, the plan becoming clearer. If we can get the evidence files onto her computer before the meeting, she'll open them during her quarterly report, and everything will display on the main screen for everyone to see. Jake finished. Margaret won't have time to spin her story or play victim. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than despair. Margaret had been destroying lives for years, protected by her husband's power and her own carefully crafted image. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She documented everything, confident that her victims would never have the resources or credibility to fight back. She was about to learn how wrong she'd been. The Henderson and Associates annual shareholders meeting buzzed with the energy of another successful year, but I watched from across the street with my heart pounding like a drum. Through the conference center's glass windows, I could see Margaret gliding through the crowd in an elegant navy dress, playing the perfect executive wife as she charmed board members and major clients. Files are loaded and ready. Jay confirmed through my earpiece, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what we were about to unleash. Patricia's laptop shows the quarterly report file with our evidence package embedded. When she opens it during her presentation, everything will display automatically. I'd spent 3 sleepless nights crafting the perfect evidence compilation: security footage, audio recordings, email correspondence, and victim testimonies arranged in chronological order to tell the complete story of Margaret's 5-year reign of terror. Most importantly, I'd included statements from 6 other men she destroyed, brave souls who'd finally agreed to speak up when they learned they weren't alone. "There's Patricia now," I whispered, watching the CFO enter the conference room with her laptop bag. Patricia Williams had built her reputation on meticulous attention to detail and zero tolerance for corporate misconduct. If anyone could handle this revelation professionally, it was her. The meeting began with Robert's opening remarks about company growth and future opportunities. He looked confident and proud, completely unaware that his world was about to implode. Margaret sat in the front row, occasionally nodding and smiling at his comments like the supportive spouse she pretended to be. 25 minutes into the meeting, Patricia stepped up to the podium for her quarterly financial report. My palms were sweating as she connected her laptop to the presentation system and opened what she thought was a standard PowerPoint file. The first slide appeared normally: quarterly revenue figures and profit margins. But then the embedded video files began playing automatically, and Patricia's gasp echoed through the conference room microphone. The main screen behind Robert suddenly displayed security footage of Margaret cornering Michael Torres in the supply closet 3 years ago. The audio was clear and damning. "Don't think you can ignore me just because you got that promotion. I've been very good to you, and now it's time for you to be good to me. What the hell is this?" Robert spun toward the screen, his face going pale as he recognized his wife's voice. But the presentation was just beginning. Slide after slide revealed Margaret's pattern of predatory behavior: surveillance footage, recorded conversations, and her own emails describing her victims as projects to be taken down a notch. The room fell into stunned silence as 5 years of calculated cruelty unfolded in real time. Margaret tried to stand, her composure finally cracking. "This is fake. Someone's trying to frame me." But her own voice continued, playing from the speakers, recorded just weeks earlier. "David seems like the perfect target. He's ambitious but insecure, works too hard to have many friends. Robert will believe anything I tell him because he's still guilty about our marriage problems." The blood drained from Robert's face as he heard his wife's casual discussion of manipulating his emotions and destroying an innocent employee's life. Around the room, board members and clients stared in horror at the woman they'd respected and admired. "Security, stop this presentation." Margaret screamed, but the security guards stood frozen, unsure whether to follow orders from someone who was simultaneously being exposed as a serial predator. The final segment began playing victim impact statements from the 6 men Margaret had destroyed over the years. Michael Torres spoke directly to the camera. "She didn't just ruin my career. She took away my ability to trust people, to believe in fairness, to hope that good work would be rewarded. I've been unemployed for 2 years because she poisoned my reputation so thoroughly." Margaret made a desperate run for the exit, but Patricia's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "Security, please prevent Mrs. Henderson from leaving. We need to discuss these revelations immediately." The presentation concluded with a timeline showing how each victim had been systematically targeted, harassed, and destroyed using identical tactics. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and completely devastating to Margaret's carefully constructed image. Robert slumped into a chair, his head in his hands. "How could I have been so blind? How many innocent people did I destroy because I believed her lies?" "The important thing now is making this right," Patricia announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone taking control of a crisis. "Mrs. Henderson, you're banned from company property pending a full investigation. Mr. Henderson, given your role in enabling this behavior, the board will need to discuss your continued leadership." Within hours, Margaret was arrested on charges of extortion, harassment, and conspiracy. Local news crews surrounded the conference center as word spread about the shocking revelations. The woman who'd presented herself as a pillar of the community was revealed as a calculating predator who destroyed lives for sport. But the real victory came later that evening when my phone rang. "David, this is Patricia Williams. On behalf of Henderson and Associates, I want to formally apologize for the injustice you suffered. We'd like to offer you a position as Senior Marketing Director with a significant salary increase and full restoration of your professional reputation." More importantly, the other victims began reaching out. Michael Torres called to thank me for giving him hope again. James Wright said he was finally able to look for work without shame. One by one, the men Margaret had destroyed were reclaiming their lives and dignity. Margaret had thought she was untouchable, protected by wealth, status, and her husband's influence. She'd weaponized society's protective instincts and turned trust into a tool of destruction. But she'd made one fatal mistake. She'd underestimated her victim's determination to seek justice. Sometimes the worst mistake isn't the one you make. It's the one you force others to make by pushing them beyond their breaking point. Margaret learned that lesson too late, in handcuffs, as her empire of lies finally collapsed around her.